Good morning, everyone. My name's Damien Lawshy. I work at a little company called Amazon, more specifically AWS, Amazon Web Services. And it's a pleasure to be here this morning to talk to you about the importance of culture to sales performance and transformation. I am going to start with a little bit of a story. So it's 2018. I'm working in sales enablement at a telco with a sales force of about 3,000 people, and the business is transforming. There's a clunky mess of legacy processes and systems, and the economics of the business have been really turned upside down by regulatory change and competitive shifts. The transformation was tough. It had been going on for a number of years, and there was always this sort of idea that we're running this transformation program this year, we're going to do this, and then everything's going to be good. But of course, that happens every year. We were struggling with tool adoption, and we would make operating model changes that impacted headcount before having done the work that was necessary on process and tooling to support the headcount reduction. Sound familiar? I can see some nodding heads. Role and goal clarity was an issue, and in those situations where someone was unclear about what to do or a process was an issue or something like that, no one was stepping up. No one was fixing it. They were always waiting for the cavalry to come and for someone else to come and solve their problems for them. Engagement was low across the business. It was running at 63%. And so that was company-wide. In customer-facing roles, so frontline sales, it was even lower. And so you've got half the sales force effectively quiet quitting. So just think on that for a second and imagine the effect that has on the customer experience and on sales performance. I'll come back to this story in a moment. So the big idea I want to share with you today is that culture drives engagement and engagement drives performance. And that's the flywheel that's available to organisations that understand that and place a deliberate focus on the culture of their organisation. Qualtrics research tells us that companies that do put deliberate focus on their culture have 87% decreased turnover. 87%. Gallup have found that companies with a deliberate focus on culture have 41% less absenteeism. With a healthy culture and strong engagement, you have increased discretionary effort, people going above and beyond of their own accord, accelerated innovation, increased productivity, lower people costs, and improved profitability. And, I think it's plain to see highly engaged people, particularly salespeople, make the customer experience. They advocate for your brand and your product. Disengaged employees break the customer experience. So, the effect of employees showing up, staying, and committing to customer outcomes is tangible. McKinsey research finds that transformations are 5.3 times more likely to succeed. Not just twice as likely, not 3 times more, 5.3 times more likely to succeed. And Gallup has found that business units with high engagement are 23% more profitable. And I was just reading I don't know if it's hot off the press, but a recent article from McKinsey on culture in the hybrid workplace. And so the latest data that they've got, I'm just going to read it. Companies with healthy cultures have 3 times greater total returns to shareholders. We also looked at causation and seen a positive relationship where health drives performance and vice versa. So 70% of transformations fail largely due to people and culture-related challenges. A sobering number indeed. So some signs that, maybe some of you can relate to some of these, either in your current or previous organisations. Some signs that your culture might need a little bit of TLC include these 6 things. So some of these are potentially transformation relevant. Some of them are broadly relevant, so transformation and BAU. But you might see if you're running through a transformation, you might observe change resistance, people resisting adopting new processes, changes to their role descriptions, changes to territories or ways of working. You might see a low take-up of technology investments, new tools that you want people to use, or use them in different ways. And in transformation or in BAU, some things that you might see is this blame culture. So, always waiting for somebody else to solve problems, the everything's broken mentality. Attendance and productivity can be an issue. Maybe sometimes you might see a little bit too much business being done in the pub. And slipping deals and a focus on the bottom of the funnel. Again, some nodding heads, I can see some people relate. The more of these signals that you see and the stronger they are, the greater the chance, your culture could use a little bit of TLC. So those signs that we were just looking at a second ago, who believes that indicates an absence of culture? No hands going up, that's good. Because there's not an absence of culture. It is a culture, it's just not a healthy one. And the point that I want to make is that if you're not deliberate about and thoughtful about the sort of culture that you want in your organisation, one will form on its own and it may not serve your strategy. So in a vacuum, the influences are in the driver's seat and what you tolerate, you endorse effectively. So let's look into what culture is and how you can be deliberate about creating one that works for you. So when I talk about culture, it's the way we work around here. It's the way people think, act and behave when no one's looking. When I talk about behaviour, it's role modelled standards. It's what are the acceptable standards of behaviour in meetings? What's the acceptable tone of voice in emails? In systems, how do we budget? How do performance reviews work? How do we set KPIs? And how do we structure the organisation? And symbols, so how are resources allocated? How do we prioritise? How are people promoted? And how do we dish out perks? These are all signals about what the organisation values. And you can use them as nudges to steer culture and sort of highlight what's good and almost in a way, sort of not punish, but discourage what's not. Culture needs upkeep. Interventions are good, but as we all know in enablement, they can be sugar hits and they can wear off. It needs to be an everyday feature of the language of the business, the behaviour of the business. It's something that, repetition is helpful. And you need to adapt it as the business evolves, and you need to maintain it as your workforce turns over. And you've got to remember, with workforce turnover, especially if you're trying to repair a damaged culture, you might have higher turnover. So you've got more people coming into the business. So as fast as you're trying to guide people towards the culture that you want, you've got new people coming in, bringing what they're used to, their standards of behaviour and their protocols. So that needs constant love and attention. I've seen some places where people run a culture initiative and it's like handing out swag or merch, or it's monthly drinks, and that maybe that sort of helps culture a little bit, but that's not culture. That's to me, that's sort of that's community, and community is great, but culture is bigger than that. So back to my story. So we had that terrible engagement score of 63%, and we were seeing all of those signs that I was talking about before, that our culture needed attention. So change resistance, low take-up of technology investments, the blame culture, always waiting for someone else to fix my problems, the everything's broken mentality. So what can you do in that situation? Well, a lot, actually. And I would commend to any of you, if you're looking for an opportunity to make an impact on a business, on a team, going into a place that has a culture issue is a fantastic opportunity. And I've been at AWS for 3 months, and that isn't a business with a culture issue, I have to say. But I was thinking before I went into this role, people sort of think about when they're looking for a new role, they want to evaluate the culture of the business that they're going into, and maybe you're looking for one that is a fantastic culture and it's perfect. But if you come across an opportunity that's a good opportunity with a business with high potential, but there's a cultural issue, grab it, because culture change is doable and it makes a huge difference to the business, and it's really rewarding. So what did we do about it, and what can you do? Well, here are 8 ideas. So first of all, use research-backed statistics and benefits to get executive sponsorship, and get SME help. I will give a little plug here to an organisation that we used for SME help. The organisation's called Walking the Talk, and we use them really just in an advisory capacity. They can come and do everything with you and for you, but we just got some initial guidance from them on diagnostic and program setup, and then we executed. But SME help is really valuable. But the point on executive sponsorship is an interesting one, because senior leaders tend to have rose-coloured glasses when it comes to the health of their culture. Would you believe it? Yeah, there's a significant statistical difference between what leaders perceive as the health of the culture of their business and what their people actually think. Second one is you need to then go and do, once you've got your sponsorship and you're going to start a program, first up you need to do that diagnostic, and you need to try and isolate your biggest blockers, and you need to do that with your leadership team, your senior leadership. And obviously the reason for that is that they need to deeply understand the issue, and being part of the diagnostic helps them process that mental model that for the rest of the program keeps them focused on the prize. But isolating the blockers is important then to the next step, which you do with your leadership team as well, which is identifying 1 or 2 cultural priorities that you want to form as the foundation for the future culture of your organisation. And they might be things like accountability. Do what you say you're going to do. Like just that simple concept. I'm sure you can all relate to some organisations where if everyone did that, how much that would just move the needle, right? And if that's your culture, if I commit to doing something, it's going to get done when I said it would be done. Maybe one team, is another priority for your customer obsession. So there's some examples, but the important thing to do is the temptation when you do this is to come up with 10 priorities for your cultural shift, your cultural change, where you want to take the culture of your organisation. And that's natural and normal, but you can't work on 10. You can work on 1, maybe 2, pardon me. And that's really important. So pick 1 or 2, keep the rest of them up your sleeve. When you think you've nailed the first 2, then you can introduce another one. So the next one is making a public executive commitment to culture change. Now, we all know what's important to my boss is important to me. And so, culture is one of those things that needs to be important to the whole leadership team from top to bottom. But setting this as a priority for everyone, for the organisation, saying that we're serious about this, it really does need to come from the top, and it needs to come with conviction. Because the next step is you want to identify some exemplars to help you with this. The idea of this is that you've got people across the business who there we are. You've got people across the business who are going to help you make these cultural nudges and the culture shift. They're going to, it's going to sort of, they work as sleeper agents who embed the new norms and behaviours through their peers and their teams, and they form sort of like a network, a movement. And these guys will be the organisation's conscience when it comes to culture. The eyes, the ears, they'll live it, breathe it, look for it, and share it. When you choose these exemplars, you're looking for people who already sort of role model the sorts of behaviours that you're looking to amplify. They need to be respected people, of course, and influential. And for a while, they might feel like a lone nut dancing on a hillside, preaching these new things that we want everyone to do in terms of behaviours, the way they think and act, and shaping culture. But soon enough, others will follow, especially with that top to bottom leadership support. Others will follow. And who's read The Tipping Point? Lots of hands going up. Who knows, what's the tipping point threshold? Anyone? 25%. Only 25%. If you can get 25% of the organisation starting to emulate these exemplars, these influencers, then the rest of the organisation will start to follow. You need to activate these people, so it's important to do a very purposeful and directed, and I will call it an intervention, but you need to bring them together and you need to sort of educate them, give them some process structure, a cadence, and make sure that they've got guidance, encouragement and air cover to do what they need to do in support of, that leaders are demonstrating that they've got these people's backs. Because these people are going to be they'll be doing segments in their team meetings and things like that, and observations and leading experiments. And so it takes a little bit of bravery, and their peers need to see, again, they need that reinforcement. This is important to leadership. Now, these people are going to run some culture experiments. And as part of that activation, you get them to brainstorm and develop some culture experiments that they can go back out into the business and implement as teams. And then you evaluate the experiments for impact. And then you take those most impactful experiments and maybe you merge some, you adapt them. But then when you've worked out what works, you scale it up and you roll it out across the organisation. And some examples of the types of experiments that we used or that I've heard of. One is this concept of above and below the line thinking. You may have heard of this before, but and the way they did it, now this was pre-COVID, and they adapted it sort of when we shifted to hybrid working. But pre-COVID, they would put a line of masking tape around the wall in every meeting room, just as a reminder that there's a line, and is your thinking above the line, which is, taking responsibility, finding a path forward, or is it below the line, which is that blame, justify, deny, avoid thinking. It becomes like the saying, is that a bit below the line, or let's get back above the line, becomes a really easy way to, get everyone back on track and get their thinking back into a positive culture where it should be. The remote working adaptation of that was, certain people, particularly the exemplars, would have a virtual background that maybe had some visual cue or something like that. Another experiment that was quite effective was this concept of a meeting coach. So at the beginning of any meeting, from team meetings right up to executive meetings, and actually especially executive meetings, someone would be appointed, and there'd be turn taking here as a meeting coach, and they would participate in the meeting, but they'd also be deliberately observing what was happening in the room, the interactions, the inclusion, the turn taking, the psychological safety, the above, below the line. And at the end of the meeting, they'd have 5 minutes just to debrief and highlight what was done really well and coach on the opportunities for improvement. We also have to understand that, a lot of businesses aren't monocultures. And so, these experiments might need to be adapted in different parts of the organisation. Next up, so establishing a culture of trust and inclusion. So dialogue with your people is really important at all times, not just when you're trying to undertake a culture shift, but especially when you're trying to undertake a culture shift. And a couple of really easy ways to do that is with your leaders, having just as a standard operating procedure that they're running skip meetings frequently, inviting, if you've got large teams, large organisations, having executives invite people in from across, like through the spectrum of the hierarchy, inviting small groups of people in for an intimate roundtable where they can just come and talk about anything. That sort of helps sort of build a feeling of inclusion and trust and the ability to speak freely and give feedback. And the other one is, we've heard a lot about psychological safety yesterday. Everyone's heard about Project Aristotle. Hands up. Okay, not so many hands. So in a nutshell, Google a number of years back looked to try and work out what was the secret ingredient to high-performing teams, and they had a number of hypotheses around, was it the makeup of teams, was it the leader, was it their rituals, and there was one thing that they narrowed it down to, and it was psychological safety. And that essentially is that feeling that people have that they can be open, they can share, they can contribute, they're included, and building that does take a little bit of deliberate practice. And so, all of your exemplars and all of your leaders kind of need to understand what that is and how to practice it. And it's inviting everyone to the conversation, making everyone feel like they're on a level plane. Measuring and tracking is an interesting one. So measuring culture, tracking culture is a tricky one, but what we know through the research the causal links to lagging indicators that we see. So engagement scores obviously is one, but when you go below the engagement scores and you look at the verbatim feedback that employers give you, and they're talking about some of those symptoms that we had before, broken processes and those sorts of things, you want to see a reduction in some of those keywords in the verbatims. And then you've got the sales productivity stats. You want to see people that move up the funnel, an increase in deal velocity, reduction in absenteeism, and those kinds of things. But all of your sales productivity stats as well should start to increase. And lastly, just don't stop beating the drum on the language of the culture that you're trying to create. That's really important. Repetition. That language, those symbols, that vision, these things need to keep being fed, or you will slip back into that vacuum. And the people that you might not want influencing will be back in the driver's seat. So the result of all of that in my story was that over 18 months, we went from that engagement score of 63 to 82. People were a lot happier to come to work. There was a constructive approach to transformation and dealing with the challenges that it entails. There's a broken process that affects me. Okay, I'm going to step up and I'm going to take ownership for it and make sure that it gets fixed. My role's unclear. Well, I'm going to work with my leader and my peers and other teams to sort it out. People look at change and transformation more as opportunity than they do as disruption or risk. And so, imagine that all of the research was proving to be true. Culture drives engagement, and engagement drives performance. This was the breakthrough that finally got our transformation and sales performance on track. And if we always had that focus on culture, we would not have gone about the transformation the way we had I believe, in the number of years prior. And even if we had, we would have been better equipped to deal with all of the issues that it did. So culture drives performance and engagement. Culture drives engagement and engagement drives performance. And before I leave you on that happy ending, there we go, wrong button. Just some quick observations on AWS culture. So I've been at AWS now, as I said, 3 months. So it's still early days, but the culture at AWS is really strong, and it's something that I've really noticed and appreciated. And I've got to say, as someone who's spent a lot of time and focus on culture in the past, I'm really quite buoyed by it and impressed with what they've done there. I believe it's a big driver of their success. It's a really innovative business, and these are some of the things that I think have helped that. There's this idea that it's always day one, and that really helps, I think, just in terms of transformation. Well, you know, some organisations look at transformation and growth targets as one and done. You know, we get to this level and then we'll be able to take a breather, or everything will be static for a long time. And you know, we all know that that's a myth. But the day one mentality is that everything we've done so far, as good as it might be, this is still just the beginning, and there's still so much more that can be done. And it's also a rejection of bureaucracy and corporate flabbiness. It sort of helps maintain a little bit of a startup mentality, which is great. Amazon also have these 16 leadership principles, and you know, they're not just hashtags or three-word slogans. Each of those 16 leadership principles is concisely explained. And if you guys haven't seen these before, I would highly commend you to just Google Amazon leadership principles and have a read, because there's 16 sounds like a lot. I was a little bit overwhelmed by them at first, but they all make sense. And there is this cleansing process that happens at Amazon. You know, they've added some, and every time they add something, they go, okay, we've got to lose something. And I think there has been one or more deprecated over the years, but the 16 that they have are all still relevant, and they're all still super powerful. So check them out. They're used in planning, retrospectives, awards. They help shape a lot of behaviour. And some of the most impactful ones, and the ones that I think the outcomes that I see from them are customer obsession, long-term thinking over short-term thinking, and being able to, like being safe to take risks and innovate. And you can imagine, you know, just those three things, the impact that has on the vibe in the business and on performance. They also have this concept of tenets. Now, tenets are the bridge between the top-level organisational leadership principles, which I said, you know, there's 16 of them, and they apply right across Amazon, not just AWS, but all of Amazon. So, you know, Kindle, Alexa, Audible, Twitch, you know, Amazon Retail. But tenets help. They're hyper relevant to the functions that each team performs. And you know, it's up to maybe 4 to 6 ideas that this is how we behave, this is how we create value, these are the things that are important to us, that enable us to live by the leadership principles but have an impact and really be customer obsessed and make sure that we're creating the customer or stakeholder experience that we want to do. And lastly, language and rituals. So they talk about, they don't talk about people, or, you know, we have this collective noun Amazonians, but they talk about, you know, when they talk about headcount, they talk about builders. So they talk about their people as builders, which I guess implicit in that is that people are not passengers and they're not observers. They're, you know, we are builders, we're doing something, we're creating something. And concepts like single-threaded ownership and 2 pizza teams and the writing and reading culture as opposed to PowerPoint at Amazon is something that's quite peculiar. And rather than go into those, just in the interest of time, maybe I'd suggest if you're interested in any of those things, see me in the break or jump on YouTube. There's so much content in there that you can look at where people have dissected these things and talked about how you can amplify these in your organisation to your benefit as well. But what I want to say is, you know, it sure doesn't hurt that we're in a growing industry or that we've got the best product out there, my opinion. But this is what helps drive sales performance of 30-60% CAGR. there are challenges with that sort of growth. Like, how do you double the size of your business every 2 years sustainably, bringing that many people in that quickly, right? It's a big challenge, and this is a big part of the answer to that. It is the symbols, systems, processes, rituals that lead people to think, act, and behave in a certain way, and it fuels the flywheel, of sales, transformation, culture, engagement, and performance that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. That's it from me. Thank you.